Well, welcome back to the Grand Weaver. So excited to have everybody join us. As you know, the Grand Weaver, the story is about how God is weaving the stories of men and women through many decades even together. And so today we have Bruce Koblish from Unwavering Resolve. And I thought it would make a lot of sense to have Mr. Mark Heimermann be my co-host today, because a lot of the history between Bruce and Mark a long time ago has kind of led us to this point today. So I'm actually going to start with Mark. If you could share a little bit of this history with this character, Bruce, that you have vouched for and said I should have on this show. So I'm trusting you. We're going to see how this goes, but maybe if we could just go back in time a little bit and you could share a little bit of how we got to today. And then
I got to interrupt you here, Larry. Behind these smiles is a lot of stuff you don't want to talk about.
Right. Yeah. We'll edit it for the podcast audience.
I look at Mark and I see the smile and I know what he's thinking.
Yeah.
He's looking at me. Yeah.
Is it okay to open up with some theme music? Oh, Dreamweaver.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So yeah, it's totally fits the weave of decades.
Mm-hmm.
Started out, met Bruce, didn't really have a relationship at the time, except for I was a background singer for him in the studio back in, what was it, late 80s, Bruce?
Yep.
Bruce Carroll, and there's probably another artist or two. Was I in the group?
I remember Bruce Carroll, yeah.
That's the one I remember, and that weaves into the tapestry of our lives together. But then probably not much contact, Bruce, probably until when you were president of GMA, unless you recall some things. But he was president of GMA the year I won Song of the Year with Toby Mac for Jesus Freak. Toby and I wrote that song, and I'll throw in that Bruce and I are Green Bay Packer fans, and Reggie White was the presenter that night. And I went up and hugged Reggie, and I got to
got sacked by him.
Really got sacked by him. Anyway, that was an honor, of course, and wasn't expecting to win Song of the Year, because up until that point, and Bruce could verify that all the winners were always the most conservative artist and song out there, and not a problem, but just was not even considering being ready to speak and accept an award. So anyway, that happened, and Bruce really became a huge part of transitioning the GMA into some newer, a little more, aggressive approach to the Dove Awards.
Yeah.
And so from there, I had produced all the DC Talk records, and in '98, I had finished the Supernatural record, which was the last DC Talk record. And I took the summer off. That July of '98, I had a visitation from Spirit of the Lord, and I was called to leave my mountain of awards and money and success in Christian music and come follow Jesus. So I thought I was already doing that, but apparently I wasn't in the way that he wanted me to. So I think Bruce, I think we had worked together on, was it Clay Cross? Did we work together, Bruce?
Yes.
Yeah,
I was president of Reunion after GMA.
Yeah, after GMA became the president of Reunion. And so we were starting to build some relationship, more business. And I started sharing this calling, this what had happened to me, my experience with everybody in the Christian music industry. I could get a meeting with anybody because of who I was. I was kind of the guy for, 10, 15 years. But anyway, I knew my life was going to change for me and my family, and I was going to be taking a different path. So to that respect, my wife actually suggested that I start a development label to ask all the questions and to seek the Lord and to go, hey, God, if we invited you into this thing called Christian music, what does it look like for, how does this need to work? because both Bruce and I had seen behind the curtain, and the good stuff, the bad stuff, the ugly stuff, and I think a lot of us had a lot of questions, deeper seeking. Things didn't feel quite right. So anyway, this was an opportunity to use the royalties from Jesus Freak to explore things together, and it was. I think Bruce would agree it was a very intense time, but he started out as a board member to my little label thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to call it a label. It was just more of a seeking and developmental thing, laying stuff on the table. And he was moved pretty quickly to the point where I remember being in the car with him, and he said, I want to be more than a board member. I want to help. I want to be involved in this. So he went from board member to president of Gravity Records. So then, clearly we were not only working together, but we were on our spiritual journeys met, and a lot of stuff went on through that. And Bruce really navigated a lot for me, but also for the vision of Gravity Records. And it was dicey and unprofitable in so many ways. But out of that, in 2001, me and Gravity were commissioned to write a response to the terrorist attacks. So on behalf of ASCAP and the GMA, I wrote and produced, and Bruce directed and conducted everybody got involved to help out make this song. And there were probably 80 artists. Bruce, how many did we end up having?
72 to be exact. I still remember how many clearances I had to get.
72, isn't that
72 artists? Yeah.
Isn't that the Ron Howard's how many shots what was he, 72? He was drunk in the thing. I forget it. So we did that, and everything was donated. All the artists licensed. Bruce got all the licenses from all the artists, from Amy Grant, DC Talk, Michael W. Smith, Stephen Curtis, anybody who is anybody was on that project. Musicians too, top musicians in Christian music, and it was called "In God We Trust." And that song was basically the anthem of hope. I think it was called "Voices of Hope." Bruce, did we call it the group that? And everything was donated, studios, mix engineers, strings, everything. And the challenge at that point was, how do we give this song away without anybody making any money off of it? So thus the birth of the Gravity Foundation, which was a 501c3. And so that song was actually the publishing. Wayne Kirkpatrick, great songwriter, finished that song with me. That was donated. Our publishing was donated, our writers, everything was donated as far as ownership, to the Gravity Foundation. So that was a nonprofit entity, but it was just the beginning. So we had no idea. I mean, we had to build a vision, and we knew it had to be about ministry and music. And so that song was placed in that. And then one of the things that we got to use it for was the Catholic military took it on as their as an anthem and a gift to soldiers in Afghanistan during the time, and their families. And so it was. We were able to make CDs back then and do the packaging and pay for it from anything we made from that song. So there was like this little kind of cool music meets economy meets all that. And our challenge was, how do you give something away?
Yeah.
It costs to give something away. So we found out real quick that there has to be a lot of sacrifice to actually give and offer something for free. Mm-hmm. And from there, the Gravity thing dissipated, and my journey continued on my path. And that's for another podcast. But Bruce and I have stayed really close. He introduced me to fly fishing. Mm-hmm. So we became fly fishing buddies and went out to Montana together. And so, yeah, we share a lot of like-minded, like-hearted stuff. And And so fast forward to where I'm going to pass the baton to Bruce. Well, real quick, in my touring days in the 80s, I played for Michael W. and Amy Grant. So Amy Grant fits into this tapestry about right now. So I'll let Bruce talk about what he's been doing with her. But the connection with Gravity, the foundation just kind of sat there and looking for a purpose. And when Amy needed a 501c3, Bruce asked if we could partner, Amy, Bruce, and I, with Gravity, because it was already a 501c3, and use it as a temporary transition until they could have their own entity. So it was exciting to reconnect on that level with Bruce and with Amy, and to actually go down to Nashville. I'm in Minneapolis. To go down to Nashville and experience what they're doing with the homeless retreats and how music is involved. It was just a perfect marriage. So, is that a good time, Bruce, to hand you the baton?
Well, I'll make a couple of comments in addition to a couple of things you said, and then Eric can kind of go where he wants to go here. But two things. I don't think you ever knew this, Mark, but I was the one guy when I was executive producer of the Dove Awards. Was pretty hands on. That I would be the only one besides the accounting firm that knew who the winners were in advance, and I had to know that so I could discreetly connect things on the production side and, just kind of coordinate that. So I had met Reggie and gotten to know him and been up at a couple of games in Lambeau. And so I actually knew that Jesus Freak was winning. And I knew that Mark was a big Packer fan. And so I asked Reggie to present that award. And
Oh, my
that
goodness.
was an extra cool moment for me. Sometimes that event, that specifically, I remember how the audience broke into the biggest cheer I ever heard at a Dove Award show because everybody wanted it to keep moving, the industry to keep being exclusive, and not being exclusive, being inclusive. And as you looked at the trends of where music was going, it was an exciting moment for everybody. They knew what that meant. And the second thing I want to say about In God We Trust is that actually the song became Sparrow Records became one of the partners, and they agreed to release the song at their expense, with all again as a gift, to release it to radio, and it had great success at radio. I think it was number one in several markets, and they got were able to get all the Christian radio stations on the following 9/11 to play that song at the exact same time nationwide, which was very cool. And as a result of that, through another friend, got it performed at Carnegie Hall as one of the early responses on a big stage. All the firefighters were there in the audience, and got a chance to tour the site when they were still finding bodies. It was quite a time. So and then with the Gravity Records, to try to kind of create a segue of transition here, what happened is that I'd been at Reunion Records and left there, and we had a couple of artists that we had signed or wanted to sign. And so it ended up that two of those artists actually ended up going over to Gravity Records. One of those masters was subsequently bought by another label, and helped at that point. It was trying to kind of get some money back in Mark's bank account after spending it all. And then another artist, Nate Sally, was actually signed to Curb Records. So there was good that came out of that, but it was difficult. And it reminds me, whenever anybody comes to you, now being the older, the senior, the mentor in the room, when somebody comes along and say, I have a new idea and here's what it is, I go, well, you got to think about, if it's never been done before, you got to think about that a second. And anything new is going to be very tough. There's a reason it's never been done before.
Yeah.
And I think so there was that was the human side, but I think I would never trade. I know Mark would say this, the personal change, the going much deeper in knowing who God is or trying to understand him more and following Jesus was a result of that will outlive any record labels or songs that that
Oh,
we
yeah.
know. So
Yeah.
it's, yeah, it was fun hearing you talk about that.
Yeah. And so I can attest to that as well, because I've had a few opportunities to connect with Mark and hear his heart and his journey and what God's been teaching him. And as Mark is sharing with me, as I lead worship in the church and wrestle with what does that mean? What does that look like? And how am I a faithful steward of that calling? Your collective experience is actually influencing me and is influencing even how I'm teaching my kids. And so I'm so excited to hear kind of the rest of that calling in '98 for you, Mark, and just the ripple effects of your obedience to a calling that was very counter to the culture that we live in. It's just always been fascinating to me, and especially as I'm at this place on my journey too, just hearing your experience. And so yeah, Bruce, I'd love to kind of hear how you tie in with from that calling to this place where, okay, now you're in a different season. How did we end up getting to this unwavering resolve?
Yeah, I think I'll try to summarize it in a couple of things. Number one, I'm this young little farm kid from north central Wisconsin. That's who I was as a kid. That's who I am today. And it's funny, in between, you have a lot of successes and places you go that you never anticipate, or maybe never even asked for, or maybe not even wanted. But they came as a Christian, and you see and understand that must be God's leading you to that point. And I think it is. But the other thing that comes to mind, just kind of an overview, is that the verse that talks about He will give you the desires of your heart. And I think we have, in a very cultural Christianity that we've developed in the United States in particular over the last 40, 50 years, I think the desires of our heart, we tended to put those towards these monumental good things. And, but I think the desire, and I would say this for Mark, I know for me, I'll speak for myself, that I was always this little kid that was taught this is what Jesus said, and that's true. And so I always wanted to know if it was true. And you go through life and you see these good things happen, but it's not always the deepest desire of your heart. And when you pray the prayer, Lord, give me the desires of my heart, that also applies to Him tearing down everything and bringing you back to that one single place. I think that's the common theme. Now working with severely broken people, homeless people coming in recovery, coming out of addiction, abusive situations. The common theme is we are all broken,
Yeah.
and we have to admit that, and we can admit it to ourselves. And part of my story is keeping a secret for a lot of years because I never felt it was safe to really talk about everything in my life. So we can have a desire and He will give it to you, but it's got to be more than just me and then telling God it. There's a power in sharing with others. We're told that in Scripture, to confess your sins, your faults to one another, right? And I go, oh no, I can't do that.
Yeah.
But it requires that, and so I think the overall connection, I would say, to getting to this point with an organization called Unwavering Resolve is simply that. Is really desiring to know Jesus, as Mark will often mention, not just believing Him, but following Him. Jesus asked the disciples, He said, come follow me. He didn't say, come believe in me, right? And that's an action statement. So we have to do certain things. We have to respond to that. And some points it requires people and men like Mark to come to that decisive moment in his life. For me to fast forward after journeys and some good runs of career things after that, but it started all falling apart in November of 2011 and brought me through a 7-year period of losing everything. Now, I always qualify that because when we say that in America, I hear some people say that and they've still got a huge nest egg. They've got, something, and I'm not. That's great. Good for you. I mean, I'm great. When I say I lost everything, I have no retirement. I'm 74 years old. I have no retirement. I have no IRA. They were all used up in the process of losing everything. And going from losing my marriage to cancer to family members dying, one of fentanyl overdose, who was a multimillionaire and hit the skids. My own son, again, we share some stories here with Mark and I, but my own son being diagnosed with schizophrenia at the age of 19, he's now 38, and going through him through multiple suicide attempts and trying to be there for him. It was part of this picture that just started going deeper and deeper. And really came to a point, as I say, the first couple of years, it was out of necessity that I started letting things go.
Mm-hmm.
It was out of my control. But it within about 2 to 3 years into it, it became a matter of choice. And it became a matter of choice because I started leaning into and embracing and accepting the loss as a suffering process that we all go through in different ways. And to work through our suffering, to come out the other end, not to look at it from an outside or try to move on, but to work through it. And that's where God, I think, does his most incredible work. And it's painful. It hurts. But what we're really trying to get to is, who really am I, and who is Jesus? Who is God?
Yeah.
And I don't know of any other way that I think it's clear in his scriptures in many places. Of course, Paul writes about it a lot, but the reference to us losing everything to gain what's important.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the backdrop and the tie, I think, really to the heart of Mark and my friendship. And it's all the other stuff too, right?
Yeah.
We've been places we never thought we would, or, like I say, maybe even desired. But through that loss process is a key part of it. So in God's own way, here it comes to a point of me going through this loss where I say none of this like a badge of honor or martyrdom. I just say this, I'm just one guy here who saw success, and here's what happened, and here's where I'm at today. Was that process that I needed once again, but at the deepest level possible, to accept. For 5 years, I would go to bed wherever that would be. I slept in my car many nights. As I was taking care of 3 adult people, my mother-in-law, I had committed when I was making more money to pay for all of her expenses. And our son, who was not capable of working and was building up, various levels of cost and debt and trying to live and not being able to support himself. And then my wife and family, and here I'm the fourth man. And but I knew it was my responsibility to do that. So no martyrdom in it, no, none of that. Just talking about the process. And so 5 years, and I still do it now and then. I would go to bed at night, lay on my back, stretch my arms out to the side, hands up, palms up, and say, God, I let go of everything that I touched today, everything that was good, everything that was bad. And somewhere along that 5-year process, when I had to start naming the people I loved the most in my life, it became real. When you come to a point where those that you love dearly and will give your life for, your children, your family, your wife, I still say this today, that you have to let them go. That's tough.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's what God asks of us, and we all respond in different ways. So this is not a judgment. I'm not sitting here saying this is the only way. I'm just, So in a strange way, then just to jump ahead, and I can go back and fill in a couple of blanks, but here an opportunity comes up where I was able to start using all my professional skills, but this new heart, this new place of understanding to serve who Jesus called the least of these. And I'm going, well, dang, I'm one of you guys. I mean, we all are in the sense of brokenness, right? And that's what is beautiful. So I have joy and contentment today that I never had in my most stellar moments in all the years of church and reading and studying. And it's all because I personally was very stubborn, but always desired that thing from that little kid. I want to know Jesus. I want to follow him.
Yeah.
And I ask him to give me the desires of my heart.
Yeah.
And that's the picture of what happened.
Yeah. I mean, and that's really, it strikes me. I remember years ago praying for humility. You're praying to know Jesus.
Yeah.
More and more, and it's never could we imagine, we're reminded that his ways are higher and his plans are so far beyond our understanding, and we see that playing out. And that's what I hear in your story is the desire of my heart, but never would I draw it up this way to get to this place in my life. But it kind of has to be, you look back and you go, yeah, it kind of had to happen that way for me to see people the way, the other prayer, like, Lord, give me eyes to see the way you see. And that's what I'm hearing in your story is this, God has given you eyes to see people that maybe you didn't see in the same way before that experience that you had.
Well, very well put, Eric. I think the bond that I feel with these individuals and anybody who now comes around this retreat model, which we've started, is to remind anybody who comes around that we're all broken. So there's no judgment here.
Yeah.
And so we're all at different levels of broken. So we happen to be in a room with people who have really lost everything, and have become damaged in the process through multiple traumas, usually not just one trauma. For people to come into a place of hopelessness and homelessness and addiction, usually is multiple traumas or one very severe trauma. So the stories of I won't go too deep here on this, but just here's the juxtaposition of people that we look at that are in that group, if you will, which we all are broken, but some more than others, right? Yeah. Number one of the gals that was at one of our first retreats for all women that time, and she said, I have given birth to 7 children. Only 2 of them are alive today. My first child was murdered at 6 months old. Okay, you take that and you go, well, then follows what? Patterns of addiction, of abuse. It's ongoing. Or the attorney who came here and his whole family was killed in a car accident, and he couldn't get past it. And you give up. You lose hope. So in between that are people. One guy was here from Huntsville with 5 PhDs in physics and biophysics, and they're all people from all walks of life. Yeah. And so it's just sit there and say, I'm never going to be there. You can't really say that, So that's kind of the heart of this work is to give a 3-day period right now wherein individuals can be brought to Amy's farm here in Franklin, Tennessee, and be put in nature, which we often call God's other book. So it's nature, God speaking to us, put in an environment where they are shown dignity, respect, and we are serving them from the second they get off the bus or the van. We get their names and pictures in advance, and we know their names when they come out. Knowing our name, knowing what our name means is a big part of how we start these retreats out. So I guess I kind of jumped ahead into the Unwavering Resolve piece, but a big part of that right now is the retreat model.
Yeah, and it's interesting as you talk about knowing their names, because it seems maybe as a big part of your ministry, and I'd love for you to expand a little more upon it. And I know in my life right now, as God's been teaching me, He's really challenging me around identity. And even this lunch I was at today, talking about resting in the midst of even doing ministry and resting in the identity as a son of the Most High. And so I love that you start with their name, because it is part of our identity, and especially one that needs to be redefined, right? For all of us, because we all buy into all of these things identity-wise. Mark, you talked about stepping from an identity as a very successful producer in Nashville, and that being part of your identity, to, boy, God's calling me to a different identity, and that's a process. And so I'd love maybe, Bruce, if you could expand upon that piece of it and how these retreats unfold and what you do with them?
So I'll back up just a little bit very quickly, make the direct connection. So Mark mentioned he came back down to Nashville and Amy had joined the discussion. Prior to that, on July 15th of 2020, I was still gainfully employed. I laugh about it now. I was actually the president, CEO of a cannabis company that was doing CBD oil. So I always say we talk about B2B, B2C. I was C2C, Christian to cannabis. So, and it was all the legal stuff. So we were making CBD oils. But I did that for about 18 months, and I was there partially because I'm wired to take on challenges, and they had a lot of challenges. And July 15th, I woke up that morning and at 6 a.m. and I said, I'm done. This was the end of my 7-year journey, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I am done. I don't have one penny in the bank. I don't have I have a place to live where I am right now, part of the story. But I can't do this anymore, So I called a board meeting at 7 a.m. and I sent letters. We got a board meeting at 9 a.m. and handed in my resignation, having no idea. 2 days later, out of the blue, I get a call from a guy who was a friend I hadn't talked to him in 20 years, so more of an acquaintance, but I'd worked with him a bit. And he said, hey, I'm John, and I run the Citygate Network out of Colorado Springs. We represent 320 rescue missions. And he said, I've always wondered what it would look like if we connected the creative community to the work we're doing. And I'm going, well, first of all, and he said, I don't even know what you're doing. And I didn't say, well, I just jumped off the final cliff 2 days ago. Yeah. So that started this, and we figured out how we wanted to proceed. In that process, I'm sorry, I got to go back again. I'm not telling this chronologically, but 2 years prior to that, I've been working in a situation in Philadelphia. Just again, was just trying to thank God for a good resume and knowing good people. But I was able to keep some monies coming in. Every time I got a job, though, it was less, and all that money was going out, to care for people I loved. But I was a friend of mine who knew kind of what was going on for me, had stayed in touch with Amy, and I hadn't seen her in about 20 years or talked to her. And we ended up, Amy and I, having a conversation. She was on the road, and I kind of told her my story, and she said, well, you need a place to stay. I've got a farm outside of Nashville, and I've got an old cabin there, and if you would want to stay there, you're welcome to it. So that was in 2018. And I've now been here over 6.5 years. I stayed in that cabin for a few months until she needed it for another event she was doing. And I was in no way recovered or ready to go out on my own. Mm-hmm. And so I said, hey, I see the storage building you've got down by the barn. You're going to think I'm crazy, but would you mind if I build that in and live there? And she said, I think that's a fantastic idea. So I said, I don't have any money to even buy one sheet of plywood. So she said, well, I'll buy the supplies if you do all the work. So over the course of a year and a half, I moved into a storage building and have built it into a little 400 square foot. Now I can call it a tiny home
because it's hip.
Yeah, I was way ahead of my time, and I'm, so, but it's actually, I live in a shed. I prefer to say that to people who know me. It's just for the humor, but that's where I live. So, okay, connect. So Amy and I have been talking. This thing comes up. I jump off the cliff. I get this call. And when I talked to the organization about how do we move this forward, they said, well, why don't we start with the retreat concept? So we put the pieces together. I went to Amy and said, hey, here's what we're thinking. Would you allow us to use your farm? She said, absolutely. And I would love to be part of it in some way if I can. And so that led to this meeting where Mark came down and we were saying, oh, we need a 501c3. Gravity Foundation called Mark and said what was going on. And Amy, I asked her we asked her to join the board. And so that's how we came together. Then we ran with that a little bit until it came to a point where Mark was kind of, he still wanted to use gravity for some other things, for worship and the things that he talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. And so it became important then to say, why don't we just start a new not-for-profit, and we'll always be sisters and brothers. We'll always work together. but that's how Unwavering Resolve came to be. Okay, so that's kind of the to fill in that blank. And so anyway, when we put the retreat model together, we kind of ended up very quickly with 4 legs to this stool. That number one was we work with rescue missions around the country, and we invite them to come to be part of this 3-day retreat. We ask them to identify the right people who they think are ready for this kind of a thing, to be stable enough, away from drugs, away from, somewhat on their path to healing, and somewhere on their path to saying, I want to reform my life. Uh, and so they will come here. We max it at 20 people. Beyond 20 becomes too big. You lose the personal connection. Below 15, you kind of make it too open and too vulnerable. So that's 15 to 20 people with their leaders. They show up. We know their names. They get off the vehicle. We bring them in. We have a huge dinner. There's no cooking facilities here, so we cater everything. We have the old Southern meat and 3, except we have 3 meats and 10 vegetables and pecan pie and chocolate chess pie, all that stuff that's not good for you. We want to show them immediately that they are important to us, that we love them and care about them. The first session we do, and I'll say the 4 principles are this: we start out with what's my name, and in the what's my name, we basically say, for all of us, this is true, but especially them. You've been told a lot of things about yourself. You're a loser. You're worthless. Blah blah blah. What we do is we look up the real meaning of their name, have it calligraphed on a little plaque for them. And in the first session, we say, God does not see you that way. Here's how he sees you. And it's an emotional moment for many people to say, Dave, whomever, come up. Here's what your name means. And we've had people actually break down at that point because they see it. I'm a new era of leadership. I am blessed. All those beautiful things. And they go, wow, nobody's ever told me that. Yeah. So right away, we're saying, here's who we all want you to be, because here's who you really are. Yeah. And we move right from that into what's my story. And if I were to say what Unwavering Resolve is really about, it's telling people's stories to create a greater awareness of who the person is that is struggling with addiction, with homelessness, with abuse, these different things. Because even psychologists will say this: once you know that the person, or see their humanity, automatically, the way we are wired, compassion is raised up within us. Yeah. So we go into what's my story. We bring in top writers from Nashville. In fact, one of them we've been working with a couple of years is now considered by most across all genres the top writer in Nashville. And people like Michael Farron, Cindy Morgan, a bunch of people that you would know, and others that are kind of not as well known. And in the What's My Story piece, we help them to understand that telling your story is healing in and of itself. Brene Brown writes some magnificent things about, the power of story and identity. And so when it's a cathartic experience, if you can tell your story, it means that you understand who you are. You understand, you can tell it. It's not just facts. It's not, I was born this year. I smoked my first cigarette at this. That's just information. Yeah. But your story is, how did I feel? What did it do to me? Where did that take me to? And so we work with them to be vulnerable enough to do that. And the writers are there at that time, usually 3 writers. And then we send them off around the farm here to sit with 4 or 5 of those individuals with that writer. And they spend 2 to 3 hours talking, where they can talk intimately about their stories. And what we're doing the whole time is saying that your story matters. It matters that you tell it. But we want to use the vehicle of song and video and media to be able to tell that story to a broader audience, to create greater awareness. So people will understand when somebody who is laying on the street, they might have a mental illness that they need professionals to help, but not all of them are that. Right. So we go through the story process. The songwriters hear that. They go away. They come back the next night, Wednesday night. We bring in top studio players here from Nashville. We have the writers, and they actually, within 24 hours, are sitting there in a group of about 100 people. We've invited friends in. Mark was able to come down for one of those, which was awesome.
retreat.
And to here's my song.
Mm-hmm.
And again, now you've reinforced the power of their story.
Mm-hmm.
So then we go into session wise. While that process is going on, we're doing a session on what's my purpose. And then what's my plan is the closing morning, where we bring the leaders of that rescue mission back in and say, we are handing this off to you.
Mm-hmm.
They're coming, here they are coming back to you into your care because their plan will unfold. And here's what the plan needs to be. So that's kind of that's the retreat model. Here they all stay outside, live in tents. We have great food. We have beefalo and sheep and animals around, and I'll tell you, people are just refreshed. And so that's kind of the model of the retreat. And from that retreat, then we're not only doing something instant and reaching out to that individual, we're also coming alongside the mission and helping them to be reinforced in the incredible work that they're doing in their hometown. But then we're developing a song, and so we're taking those songs. We have one in the studio right now that's being produced and um, to put out there. These are not written for commercial purposes. So the writers will tell us often, Mark will really like this. I mean, every writer says, man, I lost my purpose in writing. I mean, I get onto the row, I get into the room and somebody comes in, hey, we need a song for whomever about this theme. And can you write something kind of up and summer fun kind of a thing? And go, okay, well, that's how they make their living. But a lot of these guys came along and said, man, I didn't want to write another song, even though I've been successful. So we give them a chance to say, just write what you hear, the pain, the difficulty, the whatever, and so that's kind of a cool part of it. And then we will find some of those might have commercial appeal.
Mm-hmm.
Many won't, but they'll have value. The most important songs of my life are ones probably you never heard on the radio, right? I think a lot of us would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll kind of stop there for a second because there's more to come, but that's kind of the work we do. So that's how I live very simply. I've capped whatever I would make. If I have other opportunities, I just don't want it. I mean, self-preservation. I want to live close as I can to that boots on the ground, body on the ground, slamming on the ground model, because that's where I find my purpose.
Yeah, it's so interesting as you talk about your purpose. I was thinking in my own life. I remember watching The Voice one time years ago, and I was thinking about wanting to write songs and wanting to perform. And I remember God was speaking to me in that moment and said, "You see that stage? Like the greatest honor you will ever experience is singing over a family at a funeral." Or leading others in worship. That is the honor of your life, young man. Don't miss that. And that was significant and informative to me because I think it's so easy in this culture, right, to think that so I remember writing down this idea of the honor of my stage, the stage that God has given me. If we want to use we like to call it the platform. The church doesn't want to call it the stage, but God has said if somebody invites you to celebrate with them at a wedding or comfort the family at the funeral, go and do that because that's one of the greatest honors you'll ever have in your life. I remember during COVID, right around that same time in 2020, when you couldn't even really gather, I was outside in the spring in Minnesota singing over a gravesite with 15 people. And God is saying in that moment, that is a great honor of your life that you were invited into that moment for this family. And that's kind of what I was, as you were sharing, it's an honor for us to be invited into this vulnerable, as Brene Brown talked about vulnerability, invited into people sharing the story of their own shame and their guilt and those types of things, and allowing us into that is an incredible honor for us. And it's a beautiful thing. I'd love for you to maybe move on to where do you see this going? What's kind of upcoming for Unwavering Resolve, and maybe even expand on why it's called, the events themselves are called Hope in the Gate. I'd love to hear about that.
Wow. So I'll tell you about Hope in the Gate. I did not select that name. It was a person at Citygate, and at first I'm going, okay, the retreat's coming up. Okay, that's good. Let's go. So it had the word hope in it, but what it actually developed meaning once we did the first retreat.
Mm.
So here at the farm, this is an old farm that Amy and bought and then split it up, and Michael W. Smith took half of it, and there's only like 3 people. Actually, I live in the middle of about 2,500 acres within a 30-minute drive of Nashville. There are only 4 homes calling my shed a home on that 2,500 acres. So that's given an idea of the remoteness of that. But at the original farm owner, they had gates out front, so big stone pillars and old lanterns on top, and that's gated. And we opened it up, and the first bus came in. I think it's on one of the videos we did, or somebody said, when we came in through that gate to the farm, everything else disappeared. I dropped all my stuff there and entered this new space of hope. I go, there's the meaning. I mean, so I wish there was some very deep spiritual thing of angels showing up and singing that or something, but that's how it happened. And so his hope go through that gate. And there's metaphorically, I think we could expound upon that. So the purpose of this is very pure and very clean. It's Mark, I mean, doing all the talking, I know that we mirror so much on these things. This is not about building an organization, building a monument to ourselves. It's not about having a big staff. I mean, I am the only person who works on this right now. I built very intentionally, after all the experiences that Mark said, seeing behind the curtain. So many things in our culture today, in our world, including the church and ministry organizations and businesses, have curtains, and those always get my attention. That's there's something blocking us. So when we started this, and we need donors, we have no other revenue source except that people say, I believe in the vision. And I said, I don't care how big your check is, and even if this got into somebody's hands that would be upset by this, I'm going to say it. I don't care how big your check is, you're never going to get a free fishing trip to an Alaskan lodge. Now, you can take that as a slam, but we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
If you're giving your money here, it's because you are drawn to this, and that's where you want the money to go. We will never have a development department.
Right.
I tell you what, well, I'm not stupid to the fact I've run organizations where we had 30 people in a development department.
Yeah.
That's the model. This is a different model.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm not making judgment, but we're not going to have a staff. We're not going to get an office. We don't want money going to an office. It's why I'm sitting here in one of our other sheds that my son actually built in here at the farm to do this podcast. We're just going to take that out of it. So, what we've built is a collaborative model, and it's different than a partnership model. It's like, we agree on these things. This is the goal that we all have. We each have expertise and skills. So Citygate is connection to 320 missions around North America. They understand that world. There are others who come around that. Gravity has really been a part of that circle, and the circle will grow. So in the desire to tell the story, to create awareness so more people can be helped, whether that's through giving, through being volunteering, or just understanding. So when you see somebody standing on a corner, maybe not be so overtaken, I wonder if they're a scam, but be driven first by the compassion for that person. Okay. So we was able to, again, this is driven by God's time and God's timing. We've got to have money to operate the what we do, but he's either true to his word or he's not. And I just over my life heard too many times where God will provide. And then I see a development person going and begging and just hitting every bush. Hey, can you give us $100? And I'm tired of that,
Yeah.
first of all. And I bless all those who can do that. That's not who we are. And so God's either going to bring it or not. And if he doesn't bring it, then that's the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that keeps us like stay focused,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Uh, but collaboratively. So through this time sharing the story, we now have a streaming deal for next year on a pretty significant platform that will be a six-part story series, and we will be able to go in like many of the shows that are on streaming on television, tell the story of an individual in greater depth,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of unpack that a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
So that costs quite a bit of money to be done really well, and we've been given that money for that purpose. Uh, didn't hardly even ask for it; it just came along,
Yeah.
just a bunch of meetings and coffee, and there you go. Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. You got,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, are we going to get it or not? But
Yeah.
it's happening. So we'll have a streaming deal, and that will launch now. Because of that, we are talking about maybe we can take our Wednesday night showcase, which we call it now, where these new songs are presented, and we're doing it in a barn right now.
Mm-hmm.
And could we develop that without taking away from the original purpose? Could we turn that into a recorded event in and of itself?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the discussions that are taking place. So that's getting legs to it.
Yeah.
Been in discussions with a major label group here for over a year now to do a compilation of songs. Not only some that would have been written here, but going into the catalog of a lot of bigger name artists and having them participate in that way. So that is again the purpose. We've been offered a book deal early on, but it's like we got to get there. We got to do it in God's timing.
Yeah.
That's difficult, as we all know.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the model, and it's to build awareness. Now, in that process, there's a lot of subtext. So this last year, we did a retreat in Wyoming, which we didn't know if we would do that in the beginning, but this may expand through regional locations. So a mission in Casper, Wyoming mission, become dear friends of mine. They were actually given an opportunity to purchase a 400-acre ranch with formerly a youth camp facilities on it that the Episcopalian diocese could no longer afford to keep up. They were offered this at pennies on the dollar, and they purchased it. They renamed the ranch Recovery Ranch. And so we went out to do Hope in the Gate. They will now we're going to be doing 2 there next year.
Yeah.
So there's the possibility, as God opens the door, not again going out, you see how the collaborative thing, it's like, that's what God blessed them with. And they come to us and say, wow, we need what you're doing. And we start working together. That's the model. Where that can go, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how, just thinking this whole theme of raising awareness to the stories of people that are different than us or have had different experiences. And I think I resonated with you, and we were connecting the last time around the vision to present this to young people. And so even thinking about college campuses, and obviously I'm connected to Bethel. Turns out you are connected to Bethel as a Bethel grad. Ron, who's normally my co-host, works at Bethel now, but that's just one example of an opportunity. And so maybe if you could share a little bit of the vision for even the possibility of university campuses.
Sure. Well, this, I think, touches back to how you and Mark have connected and things you've talked about with worship. But we've seen certainly the success of the model of universities embracing more of the creative arts, if you will. Here in Nashville, Belmont University, one of the top schools in terms of people going there to learn how to become artists, how to record, how to get into the business side, and all these different things. And many schools have now adopted that and are very powerful and have their own departments. Some of the Christian universities in particular will have, maybe a creative arts division or a major of part of some other major, and it will often be driven towards worship. And so they're bringing a lot of young people who have creative hearts and creative ability to be trained in how to serve the church well, primarily, right? And I think that's kind of loosely the position of Bethel. I mean, Judson University, I'm on one of their boards right now, and they are very interested in this. So there seems to be an interest. So my thought goes to is that I have seen here as a musician, being 35 years plus in the music industry, what I've noticed here firsthand is the point of our inspiration. What inspires us, who inspires us, will often dictate what that final piece of expression, artistic expression, looks like, sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
So, what if uh, more kids in college who are going to be going into the churches, particularly, what if they were inspired by the least of these?
Yeah.
Which I theologically tear me apart. The least of these who Jesus had a preferential love for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at the sum of script, who did he always gravitate towards?
Yeah.
And I don't want to take it totally out of context, but a juxtaposition is the young rich ruler. What do I have to do? Now, I realize there's a little more context. Some will argue this because they don't want it to sound like anybody with money is bad. That's not the point. But he said, how do I get to the kingdom?
Yeah.
Sell everything you have and give it to the poor.
Yeah.
So that's kind of again, nothing that was put into a business plan or a ministry plan,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like, it seems like there's a point there. So I know that with Mark, I keep looking at Mark here. If I can go a little bit personal on this, you can always cut this out, but Dad, you are a dear brother. And I believe that God does have a lot for you in the future.
Mm.
And I know it's been slow in coming, but you have an amazing professional skill and a heart, and you've laid it all before him. And I think there's a greater coming together of a lot of us, how Mark served in my life at a point when I was kind of, okay, what's this all about? And he stepped up. And I guess I hope and pray that through this medium and through all of us, or just the three of us right here and others, that it can be a point to say, God is going to give me some platform here, some way to do this. So when I talk about that, this is not about us. This is we don't take any publishing from our writers. We don't. Somebody suggested, I go, no. We don't take, we give.
For people that might be listening to this podcast and thinking about a loved one, or they themselves have experienced homelessness, or are somebody who might be resonating with even coming alongside and supporting one of these events, what would you leave us with, and just sharing from your heart?
I think we are all touched in many different ways by who Jesus called the least of these. They are not some separate they. We are all the same. We are broken people. The beauty I see in that ultimate brokenness is when you look up from the bottom, you can't look down anymore. I believe we need to shift even in the world where we're at, from a top down thinking to a bottom up.
Mm-hmm.
From the bottom up, we can start with nothing, and we're looking up to where we can find God.
Mm-hmm.
We've tried all the other stuff. I think everything we're doing at Unwavering Resolve even is simply to serve those. I just pulled this up. I got to read it, but here's the mission is, with Unwavering Resolve, we share God's redemptive power to transform pain into purpose, heal brokenness, and inspire faith that can reclaim beauty from brokenness for those who have been shattered by homelessness, trauma, addiction, and mental health crisis. It's kind of the purpose of why we exist. And our unwavering resolve is this, says it. We are resolved to do this no matter what.
Hmm.
This, for me, I know is not a job. I've told our little board, if the money dries up, I will go, and I won't pursue another career path. I can get a $25 an hour job because I can live on very little. And I'm going to use every waking moment because this is who we need to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a job. It's not a career. This is who we need to be. So I think we're all in this together. And this is just a name put on that many of us can claim that I am committed. You are committed. Mark is committed to, with an unwavering resolve, to love those who are broken and hurt. And we can say this, we are all broken and hurt. So it speaks to the loving ourselves, knowing ourselves, following him. So this has been a great opportunity, Eric, to be with you, and a special fun for Mark because of all of our history. But
Yeah.
I want to commend you on what you're doing, giving a platform for organizations that are really desiring to see God's working, to see and know God in a way that we've never known or seen him before, individually and then corporately.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I was talking about honor earlier, and it's an honor for me to have a front row seat to the stories of how God is used. And that's why I love the two of you. It's like you look back at this whole history and how he's brought your stories and woven them together for this time. And we don't even know what the rest of the story is. I love the quilt behind me. I didn't even know when I was asking my mother-in-law about it being unfinished, but you can see how it's going out in all directions unfinished. And so I look so forward to this next season and seeing what God stirs with you, Mark, in the book that he's called you to write, and with you, Bruce, and however I get to be part of whatever's going to happen next. It's like, man, that's pretty exciting. I'm moving into a season. I'm a kind of a thrill seeker kind of guy. Well, not really a thrill seeker, but it probably looks like it on Facebook with mountain climbing and snowmobiling and all this kind of stuff. And I said to my wife, I get to go to Albania next week. And I said, boy, in this next season of my life, I don't really have any interest in any of those. As much as I enjoyed all of those things, like I am fascinated to go experience this worship ministry school in Albania and see what that's all about, and hear about the stories that are happening all around the world and people that just have a heart. And what's beautiful about it all is these stories remind people that God is living and active, right? I think we in so many circles I'm in, I think we've bought into that the Bible's this old book and he's not present and active and working. And every day I get to hear stories of how God is stirring people and calling people and transforming lives. And as you were saying, redeeming, right? All this redemption that is happening. It's beautiful, this restoration that is happening. And so I want to thank both of you for being guests on the show today. We will polish this thing up, put it out there, and see where it goes. And if people are stirred to come alongside, or universities feel like that's part of the calling they have, I have no idea where this is going to go, but that's part of the fun of it. And so thanks for coming along on the adventure with me and letting me be part of yours. It's awesome.
Right on.
Thank you.